In today's episode, we discuss the original hypercoaster and how it became one of the most influential theme park attractions of all time. Welcome to Airtime Traveler. How's it going, everybody? Welcome to the Roller Coaster History Podcast. You are listening to Airtime Traveler. My name is Nathan Grace, and as always, I'm joined by my wife and lovely co-host.
Hey, I'm Haley Grace.
And thank you for tuning in to episode 40 of the podcast.
40.
It's like kind of a big milestone, but it's like not like
It's
a
a
huge
big milestone.
It's not like 50 though. Like, I don't know.
We will hit 50.
We'll hit 50 soon. We'll hit 50 in 10 episodes. Did you know that?
Nathan, I know I'm not good at the math, but that's, that's pushing it. That's just rude.
I'm just checking. Oh. Well, if this is your first time tuning into the podcast, welcome.
Sorry, my chair's squeaky tonight.
I don't know if that's bad. Here at the Roller Coaster History Podcast, we usually take one roller coaster and we dive into the history of that individual coaster rather than only one. Rather than doing a history of the roller coaster in general.
I don't know.
Just one. Sorry.
Just one.
I mean, to be fair, if the history of the coaster is tied to another roller coaster that came before it, then, I don't know. Like with Powder Keg, we had to talk about Buzzsaw Falls because those two were directly related to each other, and so, so technically we talked about two coasters in that episode. Anyway, so this is your first time listening. I am a roller coaster enthusiast and have been for a long time. My wife Haley, on the other hand, is a member of the GP,
which is
the general public.
I'm the general public princess as well.
That's right, yeah. So I'm here I do the research and then I tell the stories, and then Haley here is to listen to these stories and to make me more interesting, and that's kind of how it works here. So, and apparently it's worked for 39 episodes up until this point. So
I mean, we've got listeners.
Yeah, there are people listening, that's for sure.
Yay!
We're not just
we love
speaking
our
to the silence. So
we love our listeners. And
we do have great listeners.
We do. And honestly, for those who have commented on our posts, we love seeing those. Seeing people oh, you should do this, or oh, we love this episode, or we love that, and we read every single one. So.
We sure do. I am very active on our socials and keeping up on, if you leave comments on Spotify or whatever, I see all that stuff. So even if I don't respond or whatever, trust that I am seeing them. And yeah. I will say some of you have left some episode recommendations. Those are great. Keep those coming. The one thing I will say is if I don't use your episode recommendation, that doesn't necessarily mean I didn't like it. It may just be that I haven't ridden that coaster before, because we try to do or we have, other than defunct coasters, because we do a couple episodes like that.
Yeah. Outside
of those, I have been on every coaster that we have talked about so far on the podcast.
Yep.
So in a few weeks, you're going to start seeing SeaWorld, Busch Gardens Tampa, Busch Gardens Williamsburg for the first time on the podcast later this season. Mm-hmm. That's because those are 3 parks we're going to for the first time this year. So just keep that in mind. It doesn't necessarily mean that I dislike your suggestion or I'm ignoring you. I may have just not been to that park, ridden that coaster, whatever. So
you're just luckier than Nathan.
Yeah, you've got a credit that I don't. So
he's jealous.
Truth be told. With that being said, let's dive into today's episode, because we're talking about, for episode 40, and there is an anniversary involved with this one that kind of ties into why I wanted to talk about this one today. So, but I want to talk about, this is one of the most talked about, one of the most ridden coasters of all time. This is a big game changer in the amusement industry. We're talking about Magnum XL-200 at Cedar Point today.
Hey, I've been on this one.
No, you haven't.
What?
No, you didn't ride this one. No. This isn't... I don't know which one you're thinking of. We talked about Millennium Force, episode 30.
I've not been on this one.
Mm-mm.
Why not? Why didn't I go on this one?
You had a headache, and I was worried it was going to make it worse.
Oh.
Which was accurate.
That's right. I remember you telling... Okay, we'll continue.
You know which one I'm talking about now.
Yes.
So. Yeah, so when we did our Cedar Point trip, it was... We took my dad with us because my dad's a big roller coaster junkie too, and it was his 50th birthday, so we brought him with. So me and my dad rode this one, but Haley had a really bad headache, and I'd never been on the ride, but I knew how old it was, and so I told Haley, "Why don't you skip it today? If it's better than if it's not as rough as I think it's gonna be, we were gonna be there one more day, and so I was like, you can ride it tomorrow." But then after I wrote it, I was like, okay, yeah, that's probably not a good one for you. That's not a good one for you. So,
yep.
Anyway, we'll talk about my opinion of the ride in a few minutes here. But, one more thing before we really dive into everything. If you go and follow us on social media, whether on Instagram or on X/Twitter, you can kind of follow along with some of the pictures and videos that I'll be showing Haley throughout today's episode. Instagram, I'm limited to 10 photos, but Twitter, you can pretty much see everything that I put on there. So if you go and follow us at airtimetraveler on both of those accounts, you can kind of follow along with today's episode if you choose to do so. So that being said, let's talk about Magnum.
Let's do it.
So Magnum XL-200 opened in 1989, cost of $8 million, which is just over $20 million if you adjust it for inflation. 5,106 feet long, 205 feet tall with a top speed of 72 miles per hour, and an average 2023 wait time of 19 minutes. No, not too bad. It has really, really high capacity. The trains hold 36 people.
That's a big capacity.
That's a big capacity, and it's 2x2. It's not even like B&M coasters that are like 4x like rows of 4.
Yeah.
This is rows of 2, and they're still able to get 36 people on a train. It's a very long train. So.
Dang. I'm honestly like majorly intimidated by it.
By like how long the trains are.
Yeah. Like that's a really long train.
It's very long. In the Coaster Bot rankings, it ranks at number 72 in the country. Ranks below coasters such as Diamondback at Kings Island, Nitro at Six Flags Great Adventure, and Candemonium at Hershey Park. It ranks above coasters such as Apollo's Chariot at Busch Gardens Williamsburg, Raging Bull at Six Flags Great America, and Thunder Striker at Carowinds. At Cedar Point, it currently ranks 4th, that's just 4th? Crazy to me.
4th?
Again, we'll talk about my opinion in a minute, but 4th is... That blows my mind. So, we have Steel Vengeance and Maverick at 1 and 2. That checks out for me. Millennium Force at 3. Okay, I can see that. And then Magnum comes in at 4, ahead of Raptor, Gatekeeper, and Valraven, which...
No. I disagree.
Well, you haven't even been on it. Maybe Magnum is your favorite roller coaster ever. It's not your favorite roller coaster.
No, it will not be.
Also comes ahead of Rougarou at 8, Gemini at 9, Blue Streak at 10, and then some of the other ones fall further down. Review of the name. It's a bit of a mouthful. Magnum, I think, is a great name. Like if they had just named it Magnum. Like, I think that's a nice, solid name. Throwing the XL-200 in there, even Magnum XL is not too bad.
Yeah.
Or Magnum 200 isn't too bad because, like, we have Intimidator 305 or Fury 325. I don't think having a number in there is bad, but when you put Magnum XL-200, it's a mouthful of a name.
What ride do you want to go on?
Magnum. Everyone just calls it Magnum.
Yeah.
That's everyone at the park. You just call it Magnum. So
it's just funny.
Yeah.
Magnum XL-200.
I do like this logo, though. This is a nice looking logo.
Yeah,
This is there's two logos. This is the original logo from 1989, and then there's a more modern logo that was introduced that we'll talk about later. But
Okay.
this is kind of still the one that's used in like publications and it's still used on the website. But then there's another logo that's on the ride marquee and on the outside of the station at the park. That's the more modern one. So.
Okay.
Review of the paint scheme and the trains. The paint scheme's, I mean, it's a good paint scheme. It's just a bright red.
Yeah.
With gray supports. So
very
nothing.
Futuristic looking train.
I do like the trains are really nice looking. Like the way they've designed them is almost like a kind of like a spaceship.
Yeah, I was gonna say like very
futuristic in design.
Futuristic, yep, looking.
Yeah, it's not like there's not like a specific theme that the ride has per se. I will say some of the concept art that we'll look at a little bit later does show the train like coming down from space. So I think it's kind of
a space theme.
Yeah, it's kind of hinting at a space theme, but it's not like in your face that this is a spaceship. It's just kind of a futuristic, I guess, is the best generic term that you could apply to it. So, but they do look nice. They're very iconic in the coaster enthusiast community. Like anybody who could see this and be like, those are the Magnum trains. Like it's, they're very.
So you.
Yes, anybody like me could just say, "Oh, yeah, those are the Magnum trains." So
yeah, because I couldn't take one look at that.
Oh no, for sure. So, here's the park's description of the ride.
Oh, here we go.
Roller coasters are all about making a grand statement with even grander views. As the first hypercoaster and first ever coaster to top 200 feet, Magnum XL-200 does exactly that. A Guinness Book of World Records holder for its leading edge height is enough to amaze anybody.
Wow.
But when it debuted in 1989, it was also the fastest and steepest complete circuit roller coaster in the world. And if it's a clear day, you might be able to see the coast of Canada on the horizon. Make no mistake, this isn't just a roller coaster ride, it's a roller coaster spectacle.
That was something.
Actually, yeah, that last line is pretty funny to me. It's not a roller coaster ride; it's a roller coaster spectacle. That is some heavy marketing. That is that's just dripping with marketing speak right there. But I mean,
ride my ride.
Yep. See it to believe it is the tagline here, which ties into the original marketing campaign, as we'll find out later. So. Customer reviews. I will say, so this one, it has 4.5 out of 5 on Google reviews, which isn't bad. I will say it is higher than I would expect, especially based on how many, in how many 1-star reviews I read that completely agree with my opinion, which my opinion is the layout is great. It's a lot of fun. The lap bars are terrible. The lap bars, like, the first 2/3 of the ride, I was having a great time. And then we came into that grand finale with the bunny hills back to the station. And the airtime is crazy intense, which is great if you can enjoy it. But I couldn't because the lap bars felt like they were going to amputate my thighs. Like, it was just... It's terrible. Like, if you threw a modern RMC train on that ride, I would easily bump it 30-40 spots in my rankings. But just how painful that last section was with the tiny little lap bars, like, it ruined it for me, which is unfortunate because I do love the idea of the ride, and like obviously we're going to talk about how historic of a ride it is, and so I hate not liking it, and I only got one ride, so I don't know, who's to say maybe another ride would change my opinion, but that was just the one ride that I got, and my dad rode it with me. We both felt the same way. It just was way too painful on the thighs. So anyway, and I'm not alone in that. Here's a 1-star review. By far the worst ride at Cedar Point. Seriously. There are 3 bumps towards the end of the ride that will smash your legs into the bar so hard that it will bruise you and cause pain for the rest of the day and into the next. Did I have Bruce? I couldn't tell. Was that from
did.
Magnum, or I couldn't remember if that was from Magnum or some other coaster. Because
I don't know, but you had bruise marks, like.
Because to be fair, I have gotten bruise marks on stuff like Twisted Timbers or Storm Chaser or Lightning Run, but those are less about how painful it was and just how many times I rode it. And where Magnum, I only rode it one time, and I was like, enough. This is funny. And I don't have small, weak legs either. And I can go on all the other rides, no problem. Minus Corkscrew. It's funny because I get what he's coming from, Joe. I get this as an older ride, but it's just plain awful. I'll make sure to always avoid this one when I come back. So, ouch. Here's another 1 star. No, no, and no. Time to scrap this one. Rode yesterday for nostalgia's sake, and I should have known better. It was a rough ride last year. This time, it was painful. My internal organs felt jellied by the time we break to enter the station.
This is a great
I'm
description.
done with Magnum, and the park should be as well. Wow. I get that it was first of its kind. I do. I know it put the park on the world's radar for innovative record-breaking coasters. But like an elderly, beloved pet, sometimes it's best to just say goodbye, even if it makes you very sad. Wow. This individual is saying we should put Magnum down.
Put it down. Put it down. I like that.
Oh, that's amazing.
It's a great description.
1 star. This ride hurts, but the Valraven is amazing.
Okay, I agree.
Okay. 1 star. It is the second most jerky ride in the park. What's the first? I need to know.
Give us more information.
Here's another 1 star. No kids, no mercy.
That's an interesting one.
I have no idea what he's talking about. Is he saying that? Because I've been on coasters. I don't know. I'm confused. I don't understand.
I don't get it.
Here's 2 stars. The Magnum XL-200 is fun. You can tell the age of the coaster by the lack of smoothness. Okay. Caution for people with neck and back issues. Okay. Basically, the newer rides, the smoother they will be on your body. Man, there's a concept.
Yeah.
The rest of the park is great. Cedar Point needs to invest in larger, updated bathrooms. Also, larger, more changing bathrooms for Soak City. The lines to use the bathrooms in Soak City are ridiculously long, so if your kids have to go to the bathroom, they're better off peeing in the pools. I've heard many parents telling their kids to pee in the pool because the lines are too long for the bathrooms.
What?
Kids and people in general can only hold it for so long.
What?
This is a review for Magnum, by the way.
Magnum.
I had to check. I was
go
like,
pee in the pool.
I don't know, because Magnum kind of goes
so
up and over parts of the water park, so I don't know if that is what got confused here. I don't know.
What the heck?
I was very confused.
That's a strange one.
Here's another one. 2 stars. I was not a fan of this coaster. It was rough. Also, I nearly got hit in the face with someone's hat. Well, that's not really the coaster's fault, per se. I'm not sure if I would ever ride this one again. My fiance loved this ride. Okay, there you go. 2 stars. This ride is too short. I didn't enjoy it.
Ride too short.
It's very strange because the ride is actually very long. It's like 2.5 minutes, which is pretty long for most coasters. So, this one's funny. 2 stars. So you can buy a bottle of water in line for $4.50. Then when you get to the gate, they make you throw it away. That is unfortunate.
Water.
Yeah,
throw it away.
I don't know if that's true, but I wouldn't put it past an amusement park to do that. And then here's the last one. 2 stars. This was translated from German, so I don't know. It just made me laugh because it was translated, and the translation came back as jerks murderously.
Okay.
So there you have it. There are our customer reviews for Magnum XL-200 at Cedar Point. Let's talk about those are pretty good ones. Let's talk about the history. So let's strap in. Keep your hands, arms, feet, and legs inside the time machine at all times. And let's go back to 1976. All right, 1976.
You guys should
Cedar.
have heard our conversation.
Yeah, it was in the break there. We were talking about if we should add more sound effects for the time traveler sequence.
Yes. I was making like a wah 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 sound, and Nathan was doing.
I was thinking about. I told her I was thinking about a dinosaur at Animal Kingdom, but the beginning sequence when you're time traveling through. And are there any other rides that do the time traveling thing there? There was Primeval World, but that one I don't know. Was, I can't think of. There's some that like transport you, but I can't think of others that do
I was gonna say
the
like
time travel thing.
Flight
So
of Passage does a transport.
yeah, or like Cosmic Rewind. I guess Cosmic. No, well, I guess technically it does. You just accidentally transport back to the Big Bang. That's not. So anyway. All right, 1976, Cedar Point opens Corkscrew, an aerodynamics looping coaster. So this was a brand new model. We've talked about this before, but in case this is your first episode and you don't know a lot about roller coaster history, we'd like to touch on things, just briefly so that everybody's kind of caught up. So this was a brand new model in the coaster industry that debuted at Knott's Berry Farm in 1975, and it was the first steel coaster to go upside down when it debuted. And so Cedar Point was not about to be outdone, and so they immediately began work with aerodynamics to construct a version of it that would go upside down 3 times instead of the one that went upside down 2 times at Knott's Berry Farm. Mm-hmm. So Cedar Points would open in 1976, which had a loop and 2 corkscrews, versus Knott's Berry Farm's version only had 2 corkscrews. Cedar Point had worked with aerodynamics in the past when they constructed Cedar Creek Mine Ride in 1969, so they already had a relationship with aerodynamics at this point. Which, if you're not familiar, aerodynamics was one of the big coaster manufacturers, basically through the 60s up through the 90s, was the number 1 roller coaster manufacturer of that entire era. Maybe you could argue that some wooden coaster manufacturers had more influence, but especially in the steel category, aerodynamics was unmatched from the 60s to the 90s. And even a little bit before then. So Cedar Point had worked with aerodynamics before. Corkscrew was a huge success for the park and kind of put Cedar Point on the trajectory of record-breaking coasters that continues to this day. So they followed up Corkscrew with the opening of Gemini in 1978, which we did a Gemini episode back in season 1. So if you want to listen to that, be sure to go check that one out. That was a record-breaking dueling coaster by aerodynamics. And then that would be followed up by Iron Dragon, which is an aerodynamic suspended coaster that opened in 1987. So a lot of aerodynamics coasters, and these were all 4 of those, Cedar Creek Mine Ride, Corkscrew, Gemini, and Iron Dragon, were all designed by a man by the name of Ron Toomer, who is a legendary roller coaster designer, amongst enthusiasts. Everybody knows that name. So
I don't know that name.
Well, then you're not a roller coaster enthusiast.
Touche.
So he designed all of these rides for Cedar Point. Cedar Point had a great relationship with aerodynamics at this point, obviously. And it was at this time when Dick Kinzel had just taken over as Cedar Fair's CEO. And he was involved in a lot of these projects early on because he worked for Cedar Point, and then he eventually became president over at Valley Fair and then came back as CEO of Cedar Fair. So he's kind of bounced around the company different spots. So he was involved in some of these projects before he moved over to Valley Fair. And now he's come back as the president or the CEO of the whole company. So he's ready to make a big statement to the rest of the amusement industry. So Kinzel had seen footage of a brand new coaster in Japan named Bandit. So I actually didn't put what park this is in. that's my bad. If you search Bandit roller coaster Japan, you'll find what park it's in. That's
you want me to find it?
Sure, that's a good idea. Since I'm tied up on my computer here, how do you find what park this is from?
Bandit.
You do type in Bandit roller coaster Japan. I'm sure it'll come up. So this was set to open in 1988.
Oh, man, I cannot pronounce it.
Here, I've heard it pronounced. Oh, well, what do we got here? Yomiuriland, I think is how you say that. Probably butchered that.
You probably just cursed.
I'm just cursed in Japanese. I'm sorry.
If you know Japanese, please let us know if you said that right. And hopefully we didn't like...
Maybe that's why I didn't put it in the script. Maybe I was like, there's no way I'm pronouncing that right.
Yeah, maybe.
So Bandit was a Togo constructed coaster. So Togo's a manufacturer over in Japan. That's probably the number one Japanese manufacturer. And the coaster was unique because it was huge. First of all, it was 167 feet tall, which was big for that time frame. But it also had no inversions. It relied on just pure speed and airtime for thrills and only had lap bars instead of the traditional over-the-shoulder restraints that were really popular at the time. And so while Ron Toomer was at Cedar Point working on Iron Dragon, he was asked about the tallest coaster in the world, which at the time was going to be Aerodynamics' 170-foot tall Shockwave that was being built at Six Flags Great America. And Cedar Point asked him if Aero could go above the 170-foot mark, and basically Ron Toomer said, without hesitation, like easily we could go past 170 feet. So Cedar Point also approached Togo about doing something at the park, but I guess the value of the dollar was really bad at this point, and so Togo's asking price was just way higher than Aerodynamics. And they also talked to another couple companies like the Din Corporation and Intamin, but ultimately with the relationship they already had with Aerodynamics, they just decided to move forward with them. So with Bandit as the inspiration for this new ride, Aerodynamics pitched a 187-foot tall, $7 million steel coaster to Cedar Point. And Kinzel was pretty happy with this.
What year is this?
So this is like 1988-ish. So because this is like early 1988 we're talking right now.
Okay.
And Kinzel was pretty happy with that because Kinzel basically just said, I want to have the tallest roller coaster in the world. That was his goal. Because he wanted Cedar Point to have the tallest full circuit roller coaster, which means it's not a shuttle coaster. If that makes sense to you.
No, but go ahead.
I'll explain because I want people listening to understand too. Shuttle coaster just means the circle is not a closed circuit. So you basically, it could launch out and then you'd go into a spike and then go backwards back into the station. Does that make sense? So you don't complete a full, you don't go all the way around. You would go partway through the circuit and then go backwards through the circuit back into the station. Okay. So there are some coasters that were shuttle coasters that were taller than that. But those are, it's harder to, it's less impressive with the height of shuttle coasters because the train doesn't actually reach the full height of whatever spike, because that would be too dangerous to push the coaster like right up to the edge of the spike, like about to fall off.
Yeah.
So that's why full circuit coasters generally get more attention for records, because you know that the coaster is going to travel through the full layout every single time. So
yeah.
Anyway, so Kinzel was happy with 187 feet because that was going to break the record, but someone on the board was basically like, how much more would it cost to just go for 200 feet? Why don't we just be the first ones to get to 200? And so that kind of made everyone think for a second and just be like, that would be a great marketing. Like, that would be great marketing to say that we were the first to 200, right? So Aerodynamics came back with a 205-foot tall version that was an extra $1 million, but they felt that extra $1 million was worth the marketing value that hitting 200 feet would be worth. And so the contract was signed. So on August 16th, 1988, Cedar Point announced Magnum XL-200, the first hypercoaster, as Cedar Point called it, meaning a coaster which surpasses the 200-foot mark. So here's some of the concept art from early on. So this one's really cool because Cedar Point actually posted this in the last few years. So this is like a full high def image of the original concept art from 1988. Some of this other stuff is, kind of blurry. It's just stuff that people took pictures of, but this is like a nice, crystal clear high def. So it's cool to see that they did like a digital scan of the concept art from back then. So, and then you can see here this advertisement. Magnum XL-200, the highest, steepest, fastest roller coaster in the world. And then this other one, this was the tagline that was all over all of their advertisements. Even when you see it, you won't believe it. So
that's a great tagline.
There you go. So the coaster would actually, sometimes coasters break the bounds of just roller coaster enthusiast news and sometimes into like nationwide news. And, when you see like Fox or CNN or CBS talking about roller coasters, that's when you've kind of surpassed just the enthusiast community and it's, breaking into mainstream news, right?
JP's getting some love.
Exactly. And so that's what happened when Magnum was announced. When I was pulling, looking at articles, I found over 90 major newspapers that published about it in the days following the announcement, from Los Angeles to New York City, Houston, Detroit, Chicago, all over the country, people were talking about Magnum. So the name, the whole idea behind the name was to just really emphasize how big this coaster was. So Magnum it comes from a Latin word which means, I think, large or extra, something like that. So also was inspired by the popularity of Magnum PI at the time, which I guess was one of Kinsel's favorite TV shows. So XL stood for extra long or extra large, and 200 for the height of the coaster, obviously. So
again, mouthful.
It is a mouthful. So. Construction began shortly thereafter, with an expected opening when the park was scheduled to open for the season on May 6th, 1989. So here's some construction photos. So here's the footers being laid basically almost on the beach, which is quite fascinating. Crazy. So it is right there, which is pretty cool. We kind of saw the same thing with Gatekeeper on the other, further down the shoreline from here, but
because didn't we ask the question, how the heck did they make with sand work?
Yeah, I think we did talk about that when we talked about Gatekeepers. Is there any, I don't know construction at all, right? That is just, that's not my expertise. I'm not an engineer, whatever. I'm not, that's not my area of expertise. So I have no idea if building on sand is, I'm sure there's some complications with that because it's not as sturdy as building it to rock.
There's a question we can ask my brother.
There you go.
Is a construction management major, so construction is literally his life. So,
because I imagine once you get the concrete footers poured, then it's just the same. But I just don't know how different pouring the concrete footers are into sand versus dirt or rock. I don't know the differences and all that. So anyway, it is interesting.
With the way the waves come in, wouldn't that pull the sand back? They have to pull and.
Clearly the footers have to go pretty deep, but
every couple of years, something like that.
Well, it pulls it back, but the waves also will push sand out onto the shore as well. So. Anyway, so construction continued throughout the winter. Construction was going completely on par. Everything looked like it was going to be ready. The only problem was 1 week before opening, the track was complete, but the trains hadn't been tested yet. 1 week,
that's not good.
Yeah. So the 1 week to go, they basically said they got the trains and they basically is just we are going to test the heck out of this thing. And this is a different time frame too, because listen to this. So Kinsel was there when they started testing it. After watching the first test cycle, he and several maintenance workers would ride the second ever test.
That's
so the train went around the track one time, and the CEO of the company is like, "Let's go." That is not how it's done today. Not at all. OSHA looks at that and says, no.
What dumb. What dumb.
So, during this test, the final brake run failed. Oh, no, not the final brake run. Sorry. There's a trim brake that's like right before. So there's like two sets of brakes. There's like a trim brake as you come out of the last airtime hill that kind of slows you down to like, I don't know, 5-10 miles per hour. And then you kind of take the last couple turns slow and then into the final brakes. The trim brake failed. So they went through those turns at like full speed and then slammed into the final brakes. And no one got hurt. But they are lucky that no one got hurt because that is crazy.
I remember how we had this conversation once, like, you know, why is that a rule? Because someone actually did that.
Yes, that's exactly what.
This
is why they don't let people on the second test run ever.
Because you did it stupid. That was stupid. Like,
man, the 80s were a different time. Don't
touch the bears. How did that become a thing?
Because someone touched the bears.
Like, oh my gosh. Don't feed the crocodiles. Why would that be a rule? Because someone fed the crocodiles.
Yeah.
Idiots. I swear, sometimes people...
Now, you're calling Dick Kinzel an idiot, which might get the Cedar, the coaster enthusiast angry with you. I think really what this comes down to, I think it was just a different time back then. Like the regulations then versus now are just totally different. Because nowadays they'll test a coaster for like a month before anybody rides it for the first time. Like it's just like very rigorous, and so it's just interesting how different that is, right?
You can't compare them to the people that touch the buffalo at Yellowstone.
No, because that still happens.
I know it still happens. I'm like,
yes.
I saw a video either yesterday or today, and it was literally like these people pulling bear cubs off of a tree limb because they wanted to take a picture of it with them holding these bear cubs. I'm like,
brilliant.
You're gonna get eaten alive.
Brilliant. Anyway, so
you are not that person.
No,
it's just
it was just a different time. That's what.
You know what? You know what? This is. They needed to do that so it could become a rule, not to do it again. So. And
no one got hurt, which is the good thing.
So
yeah,
I can't believe no one got hurt.
They for some of those people.
Not even whiplash or anything.
Oh, I'm sure it was a hectic ride, but yeah.
They must have gnarly headache afterwards.
That's possible. So, despite all of that, though, the park was able to feverishly complete their prep work and get it ready for opening day. And on a cold and rainy May 6th, 1989, Magnum XL-200 would open to the public and continues to operate to this day.
I think that's crazy that they only tested it for a week.
Isn't that crazy? They tested it for a week. Different time.
Because
different time.
Don't they have to test it for a certain amount of time now?
I mean, really what it comes down to is it's not so much time as it's just, I'm sure each manufacturer has a number of cycles that they want before they reopen the ride. To give an example, when Fury 325 went down last year because of the support structure that cracked, B&M came in and they replaced the structure. They checked the rest of the structure and found a couple other places that need to be repaired. When all of that was done, Fury had to complete 500 cycles before they reopened it to the public. And that, I don't know if that's more or less than normal, but I mean, 500 cycles. That takes a while, you know?
Yeah.
And I'm sure it wasn't just like constant 1, 2, 3, 4. It was like, we'd run it and then check the data, see how did things look, all kinds of, more technical than, my pay grade. I don't know all that stuff, but I mean, I'm sure it took several weeks to put together 500 test cycles. And with a brand new coaster, might be even more than that, right. So, but again, different time, right? Only a week of test cycles before they open this to the public. So, the ride experience is as follows.
Let's do it.
After the train departs the station, it travels down a slight decline into a 90-degree turn to the right and engages the 205-foot chain lift. The train descends the 195-foot first drop at a 60-degree angle, reaching its top speed of 72 miles per hour. The train then ascends a 157-foot camelback hill that curves to the left and then drops into the first tunnel. Coming out of the tunnel, the train ascends a third 80-foot tall speed hill. After the third hill, it enters a pretzel-shaped turnaround where it curves to the left into a 270-degree turn, and then left again into another 270-degree turn before ascending an airtime hill and into the second tunnel. The train flies over another airtime hill after exiting the tunnel and then traverses over a larger hill as it curves to the right. Riders then hit 4 intense consecutive airtime hills, the last of which is in a third tunnel. After exiting this tunnel, the trains hit the trim brakes and make their way back to the final brakes and then back to the station. So, I've got...
Except for the first time.
Except for the first time. Went flying through those trim brakes and just whipped around those few turns and then hit the final brakes. Thought this was interesting. They did a little floral garden of the logo of the coaster for opening day.
I remember seeing stuff like that at Cedar Point and King's Dominion, and I was like, those are so nice. I really like those.
King's Dominion had like the clock that was like a floral clock.
Cool.
Then Kings Island had the floral calendar, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, they do some cool stuff with the landscaping at the Cedar Fair Parks. I appreciate that. So you can see this is from later in the summer. That's why it's such a nice day. This is from opening day. It's just a cold and dreary day. But there was thousands of people that showed up for this. So this is a really cool picture, though. You can just see like how many people are waiting in line. And then with Gemini here as well. So it's pretty cool. All right, I've got 3 commercials for us to watch. They were marketing the heck out of this thing in 1989 and 1988. So, and these old 80s commercials.
They're the
yes,
best.
Let's go. You ready for these?
They're so cheesy. All the cheesies.
All right, let's see. Here's the first one here.
My. Look who's riding the Magnum.
My.
200 feet is pretty. Well, one of those
So
must come down. You won't believe it. The Magnum XL-200.
You won't believe it. They called it the point.
Their catchphrase during that time would be "Get to the point, Cedar Point." That was
No, it wasn't.
that was the catchphrase.
No, it wasn't. Oh my gosh.
Here's another one here.
Oh, so cheesy. This is terrifying.
Ooh, creepy.
What is this freaking music? What the heck?
You're ready for the Magnum.
What the heck?
That was a weird one.
What the heck? That was a commercial for it?
Yeah.
That was like a nightmare.
We've talked about this before, that like the 80s roller coaster commercials were about like how scary roller coasters were.
So
Like it was meant to like even the Gemini commercials we watched from 1978, it was just like you will be screaming your head off riding the Gemini.
So
like
scary.
that's just the style of amusement park advertising back then. So I've got one more here.
Let's do it. Get to the point.
So what's it like to ride the Magnum XL-200?
Terrifying.
The highest. The fastest. The steepest roller coaster on Earth. Even when you see it, you won't believe it. Get to the point.
There you go.
Even when you see it, you won't believe it.
Get to the point, Cedar Point.
Get to it. Get to the point.
Oh, the reception for Magnum was astounding. Not only did it, smash records, but I mean, it paved the way for an entirely new type of steel roller coaster it was basically doing what wooden coasters had done all along, which is focusing on airtime, and then putting that into steel coasters. And so, like, even the layout of Magnum, where it's kind of like the track just stays side by side and just does like an out and back layout, that's kind of like just like what most wooden coasters at the time did. So, essentially taking what wooden coasters have been capable of and known for and just cranking up the intensity. So, wait times during the early weeks of the ride's opening were often 3 hours. And I saw that from multiple sources, so...
I want to wait that long. I don't think I would ever wait that long for anything.
I think we waited that long for Reese's Cup Fusion that, when we went to Hershey Park that one.
Nothing else was open.
That is easily the longest I've ever waited for a ride.
Nothing else was open.
Yep, that was literally our only option. So.
Go home or ride the ride.
Yep. Sorry.
How long do we wait for Guardians that one time that we got stuck waiting for it to open again?
It was probably like an hour and a half. So it was a while. So let's see. On June 2nd, the Guinness Book of World Records would measure and officially award Magnum XL-200 as the tallest, fastest, and steepest full circuit roller coaster in the world. So here's an excerpt from the 1990 Guinness Book of World Records, and a picture of Magnum right here.
Very nice.
Yeah. And then Cedar Point would break its record for annual attendance in 1998 or 1989 due to Magnum's success. So just great stuff all around for, Cedar Point. Everyone was loving it. The GP and the enthusiasts were all over it, and it was, doing everything they wanted it to do. Now, Magnum was not without its problems, and this is largely due to the fact that most coasters of that time were not designed by computers. Like, it just kind of was before that was really a thing. And so every piece of the roller coaster at that time was designed and manufactured and constructed by hand. So isn't that crazy? So, before computers, it was really just... they would draw it out and they have measurements in mind, but then all the actual putting the pieces together and like all the metalworking has to just done through measurements and by hand and by eye. So it's kind of, that's why rides before computers were designed are just kind of bumpy, because it's just, there's imperfections when it's not done perfectly like a computer can, right? So this is a little excerpt from I think this is a whole special that National Geographic did about Cedar Point's history, and there's like this little excerpt here about Magnum, so just watch this this is just a couple minutes.
Cedar Point Amusement Park, overlooking Lake Erie in Ohio, had a brilliant idea: to build the tallest, fastest roller coaster ever. In 1989, their $8 million gamble, Magnum XL-200, broke through at 205 feet, top speed 72 miles per hour. But in many ways, Magnum's ascension to the throne would mark the end of an era. Every piece of structure was hand-welded on site, every curve of track bent by eye.
The older designs, such as Magnum and the rides that came before it, weren't computer designed. They were hand bent, if you will, and eyeball bent. So it took a craftsman to build this kind of roller coaster, somebody who really knew what they were doing with a bending machine.
Magnum's seat of the pants design was an instant hit, a coaster junkie's dream. But its record-breaking height and speed was pushing the limits of its outdated design. The cranky old chain lift takes over a minute to get you up to the first drop. Magnum's architecture has that temporary scaffolding look about it, rocking and rattling under the stress of the trains. You feel every hand-welded bump in your bones, but it is these quirks of engineering that give the ride its character.
You're holding on for dear life because the hills are sharp, like riding on a bucking bronco. It's just the exhilaration of that. It's like, it's just going to collapse on me, but it's not going to happen.
Magnum XL-200 has that old-fashioned feeling of a disaster waiting to happen, but on a grand scale. To go any higher and faster, Cedar Point knew they would have to rethink their entire approach.
So there you go. I think they go on to talk about Millennium Force after this. So all that to be said, that just means that before computers, it was common for manufacturers and parks to find flaws in the design after the ride was open. So a couple things they discovered. Magnum's original trains had very little padding in the seats, and there was no padding on the lap bars. It was just a metal bar. So more
that
padding.
That would bruise your legs.
Oh, I can't imagine what that was like for people that rode it in the early years before padding was added.
No, thank you.
That's crazy. The trains also originally had upstop pads, which basically to explain the way coasters are able to have airtime without the trains flying off the track is most coasters have a set of wheels on top that actually run on the track. And then there's a set of wheels on the bottom of the track that kind of lock it into place and keep the train from flying off. Those are called upstop wheels. Mm-hmm. Most coasters have that, but when Magnum opened, it had what's called upstop pads, which is essentially just a rubber, I don't know if it's rubber. There's a pad underneath it that keeps it in from flying off the track, which upstop pads are occasionally used. Gemini and Cedar Creek Mine Ride at Cedar Point both use upstop pads, so it's not like an outdated, well, it is an outdated technology, but at the time it wasn't an outdated technology. So the Magnum originally had upstop pads, but they pretty quickly discovered that if on a ride as fast and intense as Magnum, it was the pads were just wearing out way too fast. Yeah. It was noticeably uncomfortable. And it was damaging to the track as well. So upstop wheels were added to the trains the following year.
Okay.
And then one of the most problematic sections of the track was the drop after the third hill leading into the pretzel turnaround, as they call it. So I guess the hill was, and you can kind of see in this picture, it's a little blurry, but you can see this is how it looks nowadays. Mm-hmm. But when it opened, that drop... The third drop here was much steeper before it came up into the turnaround. And I guess the G-forces in that section of the track were so bad, like so intense, that there were reports of riders that were hitting their heads on the car in front of them. Oh. Can you imagine that? Talking about a headache. Talk about head banging, right? Like, that is an entirely different type of banging your head on a roller coaster.
Yeah.
So, shortly after opening, a set of trim brakes was placed on the top of the third hill to reduce the intensity of that section. And then during the off-season, that section of track was removed and the layout was raised up. I don't know how many feet. It looks, just judging by these pictures, 10, 15 feet maybe, to decrease the intensity of the G-forces through that section. And then the trim brakes were later moved to just before the pretzel turnaround where they are today. Mm. And then if you pay close attention on the ride, there's also slight changes to the track. In some portions of the track, there's actually the spine of the track gets larger. You can kind of see that right there. It increases in diameter. And then there's other sections of the track where they doubled up on how many crossbars were used. You can see that here, how they're kind of more spaced out, and then all of a sudden the crossbars are more bunched together. Yeah. So this was done to just kind of strengthen those sections of the track that were taking more, receiving more wear and tear than some other sections. And then another result of non-computer designed coasters is the transitions have to be simplified because they don't want to rely so much on doing complicated shapes and transitions, because then that makes it more difficult for the metal, workers. So that means things end up being simplified for the sake of, making sure it's done correctly. So, for example, the airtime hills at the end of the ride can best be described as triangle shaped, and you can kind of, just looking at this picture here, you can kind of see how it's almost just like a zigzag, right? Mm-hmm. Where more modern coasters kind of smooth that out, and it's more like a rolling hills type of motion. These literally, it's like straight. It's basically, it's built in a way that made the jobs of the metal workers easiest. It's straight pieces connected by curved pieces. That's essentially all it is. I mean, you can kind of see that straight piece, curved piece, straight piece, curved piece. And that's exactly how the ride was built back then, because computers couldn't make this process simpler and easier for them. So, I was we're taking up a little bit more time than I was anticipating, so I'm gonna cut out this section here, but that's okay, because what I was gonna talk about was kind of how the coaster operates, which most of that comes from a video that El Toro Ryan did. We've talked about him before. He's a really popular roller coaster influencer.
Yep.
So if you want to learn more about the operations of the coaster and kind of how the coaster runs and the technology behind some of the actual operations of the ride, you can go and check out his video. He's been a roller coaster operator for many different roller coasters at many different parks, so he knows
so cool.
he knows what he's talking about, and he has lots of cool stuff in his videos. Very technological stuff that I find interesting. Haley would probably fall asleep watching, but that's just if that's your thing, then I would highly recommend to go check out his video. So
Can't help it, Nathan.
that's okay. It's what interests you, right?
I'm
Like
a mom of 2 kids.
so
2 very handful of kids.
So now I have a news report here. This is actually from opening day, but something that's in this video is very interesting and kind of leads into the next thing we're going to talk about, which is kind of leading towards the end of our episode here. Okay.
You move your hands in a way that looks like roller coasters when you talk.
I don't know. Well, the funny thing is, I don't know that I move my hands that much when I talk in public. Do I? I don't know if I do. Do I? Oh, okay. Never mind. I was going to say, I know I do it for the podcast because I'm trying to stay animated and not just, read a script into a microphone.
Love roller coasters so much that you talk like a roller coaster.
I look like a roller coaster when I talk. I don't know what that says about me. I don't know if that's a good thing. All right, here's our news report here. This is from opening day.
Dozens of roller coaster enthusiasts are streaming into Cedar Point today to take on their latest challenge, the tallest and fastest roller coaster of them all. Excitement is at fever pitch. The Magnum XL-200 stands 201 feet tall. Top speed exceeds 70 miles an hour. From the ground, the view is awesome. From above, we'll let you be the judge. It takes about 2.5 minutes to screech over the mile length of track, and when it's over, well, let the riders tell you what it's like.
I'm shaking! Give me a few minutes!
It was there! It was there! It was real! It was there! We arrived! We survived! It was great! So, does this mean the days of the old wooden roller coaster are numbered? Well, you might think so. But roller coaster enthusiasts say...
Oh my gosh, that stash.
Yeah.
Randy Giesler is president of American Coaster Enthusiasts.
It's like
The
my
wood
dad's
coaster is
stash.
raw and wild and rickety, though safe. And the steel coaster is contemporary, whooshy, state-of-the-art, innovative. They're both great.
The Magnum cost $8 million to build, and park people figure it'll be a while before somebody tries to top this ride. Tony Gaskins, Eyewitness News.
So the one thing that he says at the very end of that report is fascinating to me. He says that enthusiasts think it'll be a long time before someone tries to top something like this. I don't know if that was an exact quote, but it's essentially what he said, right? Because a fascinating thing happens in the industry directly after the opening of Magnum, which we've talked about before, but it's been a while. You remember? High five. Give me a high five.
Paying attention.
The Coaster Wars.
Coaster Wars.
Now, we talked about this in passing when we did our Phantom's Revenge episode back in season 1, and we've touched on it a couple other times. But Magnum is really, you can argue there's a couple other coasters. Some people argue Bandit is the one that started it because Magnum was inspired by Bandit. Whatever. Most enthusiasts would agree that Magnum started this phenomenon in the amusement industry known as the Coaster Wars, which essentially is this. After Magnum opened, it took dozens and dozens and dozens of years for us to go from 100 feet to 200 feet roller coasters. And after Magnum opened, it only took 14 years to go from 200 feet to 400 feet. Like,
That's insane.
it blew up this common, like, parks that were heavily invested in roller coasters wanted to try to snag one of the height or speed records. So let's walk through the timeline here. We're not going to talk about all of these in detail, but I just want to...
We've talked a lot about them before, so...
Yeah, so we're just going to go through this quick. You know, obviously we could do whole episodes about some of these, and some of these we have done whole episodes about, so there you go. So May 1989, Magnum XL-200 opens as the first 200-foot full-circuit coaster in the world. 2 years later, May 1991, Steel Phantom opens at Kennywood. Now, Steel Phantom likely spurred on by seeing a local competitor theme park having great success with their record-breaking coaster, because Kennywood and Cedar Point are only 3 hours away from each other. So I can imagine having a competitor park just, you know, a few hours away, building this huge record-breaking coaster, kind of spurred on this idea of let's kind of do the same thing. And so Steel Phantom, also built by Aerodynamics, but had inversions. Mm-hmm. And then if you want to learn about the whole history of that ride, go check out our Phantom's Revenge episode. So yeah, that's Haley's home park. So we love some Phantom's Revenge. So Steel Phantom did not break the height record, but it did break the speed record at 80 miles per hour. May 1994, Pepsi Max Big One opens at Blackpool Pleasure Beach, breaking the height record at 213 feet. And after 3 coasters in a row that kind of were breaking these huge records, this is kind of what, like, things just kind of kicked into overdrive here. So July 1996, Fuji-Q Highland opens Fujiyama, which breaks the height and speed record, 259 feet tall and 81 miles per hour. January 1997, Dream World hires Intamin to break the 100 mile per hour barrier with a launched shuttle coaster called Tower of Terror. Yes, not that Tower of Terror. This was March 1997. Six Flags Magic Mountain hires Intamin to break the 400-foot barrier with their launched shuttle coaster, Superman: The Escape. That's this one here. But that wasn't a full circuit coaster. That was just a shuttle coaster, right?
Right.
Okay. February 2000, Six Flags Magic Mountain opens Goliath, taking the full circuit speed record at 85 miles per hour. Just a few months later, Cedar Point cracks the 300-foot full circuit barrier with Millennium Force, which we've done an episode about, episode 30. Also breaking the full circuit speed record at 93 miles per hour. Just a few months later, Steel Dragon 2000 opens at Nagashima Spaland, breaking 3 records, the fastest, tallest, and longest roller coaster in the world, 95 miles per hour, 318 feet tall, and 8,133 feet long. Still holds the record for the longest coaster in the world to this day. December 2001, Dodonpa opens at Fuji-Q Highland in Japan as the fastest roller coaster in the world at 106 miles per hour.
Could you imagine?
That was crazy.
It's like, here, let me pull back your lips and your...
Yeah, just your face. May 2003, just 3 years after we hit 300 feet, Cedar Point breaks the 400-foot full-circuit barrier with Top Thrill Dragster taking the speed and height records, 120 miles per hour, 420 feet tall. And then May 2005, not to be outdone by Cedar Fair, Six Flags opens Kingda Ka at Six Flags Great Adventure. Kingda Ka breaks the 450-foot barrier and also takes the speed record, 456 feet tall, 128 miles per hour. So, to recap, in 14 years, we've gone from 72 miles per hour, 205 feet tall, to 128 miles per hour, 456 feet tall. No. Unbelievable.
That's insane.
So, then it stops. Kingda Ka, to this day, almost 20 years later, is still the tallest roller coaster in the world. There's been one other roller coaster that's passed it in speed, but still the tallest roller coaster in the world. So why did the Coaster Wars stop? Well, First of all, it was getting really expensive to build these things.
Right.
This was not sustainable to just keep going and going and going and going. Now, the culprit, most amusement industry experts feel the culprit of the end of the coaster wars is actually Maverick. One of our favorite coasters. I don't know where it ranks for you. It's my number 3.
I loved it. I thought
Cedar Point.
We're
recording this really late.
I'm wearing down really fast. No, I thought Maverick was my number 1, if I'm remembering.
It was your number 1 at Cedar Point. It's my number 3 overall. I wasn't sure how you rank it overall, so.
I'm not sure.
Yeah, you'd have to think about it. So
I loved Twisted Timbers. I still think that one's my number 1.
Very good. So Maverick. Why did Maverick end the coaster wars? Well, leading up to the opening of Maverick, after Kingda Ka opened in 2005, everyone thought Cedar Point was going to try to go for the 500-foot barrier. Or at least there were rumors that that's what was going to happen. But instead, they built Maverick, a 105-foot, 70 miles per hour multi-launch coaster. Mostly stays pretty close to the ground, right? Mm-hmm. It's not super tall. It's fast, but it's not super tall, not super long. No height, speed, or length records. But the coaster enthusiasts absolutely loved it.
Yeah, it's fun.
And to this day, almost, when we're nearing, we're 17 years since Maverick opened, still considered one of the top 10 coasters in the country to this day. And many people would agree, Top Thrill Dragster's had its own issues and is now being redone, but to this day, I think most people agree Maverick is better than Millennium Force and Top Thrill Dragster, the 2 massive coasters that opened before it. And so I think this kind of showed the parks that they didn't necessarily have to go bigger and faster to make a ride that everybody enjoyed.
Right.
And so parks kind of adapted by marketing different aspects of their coasters. For example, when Cedar Point opened Gatekeeper in 2013, they obviously couldn't market it as the fastest or tallest coaster in the world, but they could market it as the biggest and fastest wing coaster in the world. And so that's kind of how the parks have adapted to still build these rides that have really great marketing hooks, but don't have to destroy any records or break the bank, right? And so that's kind of...
Time Traveler, they advertise that as fastest spinning coaster or something like that.
Well, to be fair, Time Traveler cost about as much as Top Thrill Dragster did, so...
True. It cost a lot.
It did cost a lot. But like Outlaw Run only cost, I think, $12 million, $13 million, somewhere in there. But they were able to market it as a wooden coaster with inversions, which had never been done before. Mm-hmm. So you could do something for a fraction of the cost of Top Thrill Dragster, but still was able to win the Golden Ticket Award for Best New Ride the year it opened. So that's kind of how the parks have adapted. And just same thing, Maverick won the Golden Ticket Award in 2007 for the Best New Ride of that year. So that's the Coaster Wars. Now, the Coaster Wars took its toll on aerodynamics. So while Magnum could arguably be aerodynamics' most influential coaster ever, it also was the beginning of their downfall, which is kind of ironic. So Aerodynamics would construct the next several coasters to break records in the Coaster Wars. They built Steel Phantom and then Pepsi Max Big One. But Togo would take the records in 1996. And then by 2000, pretty much all the records after 2000 are held by Intamin. And to this day, the fastest roller coasters in Intamin and the tallest roller coasters in Intamin. And right now, there's a coaster being built that's going to break both of those records in Qiddiya. In Abu Dhabi, thank you. So that's being built at Six Flags Qiddiya right now. It's going to destroy all the coaster records.
Nathan's a little bit salty because we'll probably never get to ride this.
We'll see.
We're going to go to Abu Dhabi.
Never say never. But
is this before or after you buy the Porsche?
Probably after. That's probably way after that. But that coaster also being built by Intamin. So Intamin just kind of, that's their space in the coaster industry nowadays. So Magnum had been so influential that other coaster manufacturers such as B&M and Intamin were eager to push the envelope even further, but did so by implementing computers and more cutting-edge technology into their designs. And aerodynamics soon found itself in a war that had been started by a coaster they created, but it was a war that they were quickly losing.
Right.
Haley's getting real tired.
I'm getting so punchy.
So
punchy.
So the company tried to implement updated design techniques, but by the late 90s, Aero was struggling to compete. They had fallen behind the other manufacturers of the time. And by the time Millennium Force opened in 2000, Aerodynamics was hanging on by a thread and would declare bankruptcy the following year.
I remember
you
telling me about this in a
yeah,
different
we
episode.
talked about Aerodynamics bankruptcy during the Stratosphere Fishhook coaster episode.
That was it.
Because that was kind of their Hail Mary shot to keep the company alive. And then when that fell through, Aerodynamics was no more. So
yeah.
Anyway, so the Coaster Wars was started by Aerodynamics, and it ended up leveling the company when other companies kind of took the ball and ran with it. And it's just kind of a sad, fascinating, ironic story. So,
wow, that's a lot of description words.
Yeah.
Sad, fascinating.
And ironic.
If you put those three words together with anything else, it'd be like, those don't go together.
They do in this case. So let's wrap it up by talking about how Magnum's lifetime has been since it opened in 89. So in the years that followed, Cedar Point would follow up with Raptor, the largest inverted coaster, and Mantis, the largest stand-up coaster at the time. Then obviously that was followed up by Millennium Force and Top Thrill Dragster, as we talked about. Cedar Fair was also encouraged by Magnum to put more hypercoasters at other parks across the chain. Now, because of Aerodynamics struggling financially in the 90s, Cedar Fair actually turned to Morgan to build those hypercoasters, which ended up being built at Valley Fair, Dorney Park, and Worlds of Fun. So,
is the one at Worlds of Fun still there?
Mm-hmm. Mamba. We did the Mamba episode back at the end of last season. So
I get to ride that.
Yes, very soon. So, in 1998, the Golden Ticket Awards are founded by Amusement Today magazine. In the inaugural awards, Magnum would actually top the rankings as the #1 steel coaster in the world 9 years after it had opened. So you can just see like how much the enthusiasts are still loving this ride, even though
it's crazy rough.
But during this time frame, I mean, all the coasters were rough because they were. Nowadays, we've had smooth B&Ms and Intamins for so long that it seems so much rougher. But back then, that was just the norm, right? So yes, in a way, that's one way to look at it. And to this day, the Golden Ticket Awards still give a lot of praise to Magnum. It still ranks at number 30 in the steel category as of last year. So.
Wow.
Let's see. Around this time, a newspaper thought it would be funny to start a rumor that Magnum was sinking into the ground for April Fool's Day. That rumor circulated far further than they intended it to the point that the park had to make a statement about it. So, good work on that by the newspaper publisher. Coaster enthusiasts sometimes have what's called a magic seat on a coaster. I don't know if you heard me use that term before.
No, but I can get the just behind, because you always want the special seat. It's the best seat on the coaster.
And depending on the rider, the best seat may be totally up to opinion. For example, Fury, some people prefer the back, some people prefer the front. A lot of coasters are like that. But coaster enthusiasts generally agree that the magic seat on Magnum is in the third row of the first car. That's the magic seat. So, very specific. In 2004, 15 years after its opening, Magnum XL-200 received the Ace Roller Coaster Landmark Award for its historical significance in the roller coaster industry. I'm not going to read this whole plaque. It kind of goes into a lot of the stuff we've already talked about, but you can find the plaque online if you want to read it and some of the things they had to say.
You'll post this picture too, won't you?
Oh yeah, I'll post this on our social. So if you want to go and read this, you can do that. So I'll just read this last line. Made it one of the most popular attractions in Cedar Point's history and an important part of the park's eclectic collection of impressive roller coasters. And presented in June 2004. So, In 2006, the coaster was repainted a slightly different color. It was previously a scarlet red. The new paint job features what they called Molly Orange, which I guess is kind of like a red-orange color. Opening day 2009, the park held a 20th anniversary celebration for Magnum XL-200 with a ceremony. A brand new ride entrance sign, which we talked about earlier, has a new logo outside the ride. So this is the new logo, which I think it's a good looking logo. So Not bad. Let's see. And the coaster's designer, Ron Toomer, was in attendance that day. So that's pretty fun. By this point, they announced at the ceremony, that Magnum had given over 40 million rides, which that's an impressive number. There's a lot of coasters that never get to that number. So in 2011, Ron Toomer actually passed away. Here's a picture of Ron here. Plaque was dedicated by Gemini at Cedar Point, recognizing him for his work on that coaster, Magnum, and the other 3 Cedar Point coasters that he designed. So they figured he had designed five of the coasters at Cedar Point. So what better place to put an honorary plaque than at Cedar Point for him? So. Fast forwarding a little bit, 2019, Magnum XL-200 celebrated its 30th anniversary. Cedar Point celebrated the occasion by giving the ride a fresh coat of paint. And they also added some lighting and sound effects to the third tunnel. So those are
I think it's
kind of
cool
fun.
when they
just add little bits and pieces over time.
Keep
so
the original plan, but add special effects. Like, that's cool.
Yeah, it's nice. Nice little touch. In 2021, Magnum went viral on TikTok because of a video where someone threw a fish at a passing train of riders on the coaster.
Is this the same ride that the duck climbed on?
No, that was Millennium Force. That was the duck. So here's the...
That was what?
Here we go. Here's the guy who has the fish on the stick, and then he threw the fish at the train as it went by. So, now, this is obviously incredibly dangerous. Never, ever, 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 ever throw anything at a roller coaster as it's going by. Very stupid, very dumb. Could get you arrested for obvious reasons.
Yeah.
But I will say that because no one was hurt, the memes that came out of this were really funny. So there's like this one right here, POV, you take a ride on Magnum XL-200 in the summer of 2021.
With the fish.
Just the fish in the foreground. And then this is another podcast did this one, that the ride was being renamed the Flying Fish XL-200. And I found this sticker on Redbubble that's Magnum XL-200 Bait and Tackle Shop.
That's funny. I like that one.
So there's pretty funny stuff, but yeah, never ever throw anything at a coaster. Very dumb. Very.
So he caught the fish.
I mean, I guess. I mean,
that's what it looks like.
It's on the shore, so I mean, you could put. It's a big fish too. Like that's a probably good 12, 15-inch fish.
Well, he's like not got no shoes on.
Yes, this is very hillbilly. Whatever is happening here. So.
You know, my dad makes fun of us for living in Arkansas. We need to show him these pictures.
What is it? I think Jeff Foxworthy says there's rednecks in every state in the country. You just got to be willing to find them.
No, there's just places that they dwell in more, though.
That's fair. That's fair.
West Virginia. Sorry, I can say that
because you're from
Because
you're from Pittsburgh. You can say that.
Yes.
One more thing here, and then we'll wrap up. In September of last year, Parker from Ohio became the 60 millionth rider on Magnum XL-200. Here's a picture. Here's a picture of Parker. They posted this on the Cedar Point socials in September. That's pretty fun. So I don't know if he got any special stuff out of that, but that's pretty cool.
Sure he did.
60 million riders. That's incredible. And then finally, the reason we're doing this episode today is because in 4 days, Magnum will celebrate its 35th anniversary. And that's a big milestone for, a historic coaster. And though it's, slightly outdated and definitely rough, there's no doubt about that. But there's also no doubt that Magnum XL-200 is one of the most influential coasters of all time. And it spearheaded the Coaster Wars, which spawned some of the most record-breaking and influential coasters that, and it's produced some of the best coasters ever constructed, and it's continually influencing the coaster industry nowadays just because, we pushed the limits so far in those 14 years, and now that's having an impact on what the coaster industry is doing now. For example, right now, the big trend is family coasters. I think because all these big coasters got built back in the early 2000s and 90s, a lot of parks don't have smaller coasters to go along with the big coasters that they built back then. And so now we're kind of seeing this trend of family coasters to go along with it. So
I like the trend.
It's just fascinating. This one roller coaster has such a big, ripple effect amongst all the other coasters that are built around this time frame and even nowadays. So,
right.
And that is the history of the very first hypercoaster, the original hypercoaster, as Cedar Point calls it, Magnum XL-200.
Oh, that's cool.
And we're going to wrap it up there because Haley needs to go to bed.
Oh my gosh, that's an understatement. I told Nathan, I'm like, I really don't know why I'm this tired tonight, but I'm like...
Well, it didn't help that we've had to... Hopefully you didn't notice, because I try to edit these in case we have to pause recording and come back, but we've had to pause the recording several times to put our daughter back to sleep because she keeps waking up for some reason. So this is way later than we even thought we'd be recording, and
Plus
that is the life of parents. So
we leave for Disney in like 36 hours, and I am like... stressed beyond the max.
But it's going to be fun. It's going to be fun.
So fun.
Well, thank you for tuning in to this episode of the podcast. Hopefully you enjoyed it. If you did, be sure to let us know. You can give us a 5-star rating here on Spotify or wherever else you may be listening. Helps people find the podcast in the future, so whenever you can give us those ratings, we really appreciate it. And also, if you have coaster enthusiast friends that think would be interested in learning more about coaster history,
or not coaster
enthusiast friends, that's true.
You like cool stuff.
You just like cool stuff, or maybe you enjoy roller coasters but don't know that much about them.
You want something
be sure to
family friendly to listen to. We got your back.
We got you. Be sure to share it with other people that you think might enjoy the show. And like I said at the beginning of the show, you can go and follow us on our socials so that you can see all these pictures that I've been showing Haley throughout today's episode. You can find us on Twitter /X or on Instagram, and our handle is @airtimetraveler on both of those. And I think that's all we've got for today. Yep. Haley's about to fall asleep in the chair, so we're going to get going.
Sorry.
We'll have some trip reports coming from our Disney trip, by the way, for our SeaWorld, Busch Gardens, and Disney World, so be sure to check those out in the coming months. So,
I need to pack.
Yep, we got to go pack. So, well, thank you for tuning in to this episode, and we will see you in the next one.